I often honor my mother online. You've heard so many stories about her and speeches about her from me, but I don't share that much about my dad because he passed away 15 years ago. But it's worth sharing with you how much of an impact my father's human connection actually had on my life. I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and my dad was a Chinese Singaporean migrant. My parents bought a small news agency to secure their residency in Australia. And my father would work from 6 in the morning, he'd get up, he'd leave me a teochew porridge for when I got up to get ready to school to have for breakfast. And then he would go into his shop. I would sometimes, on school holidays, help him open up the shop as he put out all of these metal covered, this is before we even had digital print, metal covered front page of every single newspaper that day. And I would help him clip it and put it out there to try and bring in customers to buy the daily papers. He would pull those roller doors at that shop and then he would settle in for work, nibbling on digestive biscuits for breakfast and a coffee. And he would sit there from morning till evening. One of my favorite things during those years of my life was to shadow my dad on school holidays. And I would sit behind the counter, surrounded by piles of outdated magazines that he would let me take notes on, read, doodle on, and watch my father serve people at the counter. Now, it was very cheeky because my mum would actually make me help my dad in the shop, count change back for customers because I was so bad at math at school. But I think my dad took pity on me because it was school holidays and he would let me just sit there and watch. I would see my father connect with people from the entire gamut. The shop that he had bought was opposite a nursing home. It prepared me really well for spending a lot of time in nursing homes. So his customers would zip over in their little buggies to buy instant lotto tickets. And my father would give these people endless tabs. They would pass away still owing money to the shop, and we didn't find out until he passed away in 2004. But that's the kind of person he was. And I would watch him not just serve these people as his customers, but serve them as human beings. A lot of these older people, they were in a nursing home. They just wanted to talk. They were migrants from England. Some of them were part of the leaving of Liverpool, orphans who came to Australia, worked in the outback before finally settling at an older age. They were Malaysian immigrants. They were German immigrants. And every time my father would pivot his communication to validate their stories. A Malaysian man would come in and my dad and him would debate, was the food better in Malacca or was the food better in Penang? And my dad would be full in his Singaporean accent, and then like a switch, as decisive as traffic lights turn from red to green, he would neutralize his accent to talk to his British customers who loved the English Premier League and would talk to him about the FA Cup and the match that was last night, and my dad would go back and forth for 15 minutes. He'd share a biscuit with them and just talk. And then when that British customer would leave, then my dad would again keep his accent neutral. And when his German customers came in, he would talk to them about Eurovision. God, we loved Eurovision. And I would watch, not so much in awe, I'm in awe now as an adult, but I would watch as this man with no formal education, humble, would care so much to put aside what he wanted to talk about to be of service to others, to make others feel they belonged and that their stories were validated. And I wish that I was more like that, actually. I'm far too much like my mother, it turns out. But I learned something then. And now when I look at my radio career, that I used to be in radio, having been frontline for stations in Singapore, Dubai, and Perth, 3 diversely different markets. And radio is notoriously local. Maybe that's why it's dying now. It's notoriously insular. It prides itself on serving just specific cities. And how in Singapore I had to put on a Singaporean accent, and how in Australia I had to be more Ocker and more Aussie. And in Dubai I could just be me, which is maybe why I loved it so much, but certainly threw in words of Arabic. And I realized that pivoting of communication to connect with others, that inconveniencing of myself to serve other people, I would not have had that career without my father. I learnt that from somewhere without even realizing I was learning it. So I ask you to look at your own parents in your own house. What human connection skills have your parents left you with? Have they taught you without even realizing, maybe until you've seen this video, until I've told you today, that they were leaving you with the imprint of something profoundly valuable?